A police dog collapsed at a crime scene. And when vets examined him, they learned the truth no one expected. This isn't just about one dog's mysterious illness. This is how one K-9 officer's collapse exposed a dangerous secret silently affecting police departments across the entire country. A secret that could have cost Shadow his life. In the next few minutes, you're going to discover what that truth is and why it changes everything. Detective Marcus Chen had done this 1,000 times before. He clipped the leash onto Shadow's collar, looked into those intelligent dark eyes, and felt that familiar surge of confidence. 7 years. 7 years of working side by side with the most remarkable German Shepherd the Portland Police Department had ever seen. 7 years of trust so deep, so unshakable, that Marcus would literally trust Shadow with his life. And Shadow would do the same. The bond between a detective and his K-9 partner isn't something you can explain to people who haven't lived it. It's not just a working relationship. It's a partnership forged in the heat of real danger, strengthened by countless hours of training and cemented by the kind of loyalty that transcends species. Marcus and Shadow weren't just colleagues. They were brothers. Shadow had an impeccable record. 17 major drug busts, 12 missing persons located, 3 violent criminals apprehended before they could hurt anyone else. The statistics were impressive, sure, but they didn't capture the real story. They didn't capture the intelligence in Shadow's eyes when he caught a scent. They didn't capture the way he moved with such precision and purpose. They didn't capture the way he looked at Marcus, not like a dog looks at his owner, but like a soldier looks at his commanding officer. Respect, trust, unwavering commitment. Marcus was 42 years old, and Shadow was his greatest achievement. Not because of the arrests or the commendations pinned to his office wall, but because of what Shadow represented. A life dedicated to something bigger than himself. A life spent protecting others. A life lived with absolute integrity and courage. The other detectives envied him. They'd see Marcus and Shadow working a scene and shake their heads in amazement. "That dog is something else," they'd say. And Marcus would smile, scratch Shadow behind the ears, and feel that deep, quiet pride that only comes from knowing you're working with the best. But lately, and Marcus hated admitting this, even to himself, something had shifted. It started small, barely noticeable. Shadow's morning walks seemed a little shorter. The dog would complete them, sure, but there was less enthusiasm in his step, less of that explosive energy that had always defined him. Marcus told himself it was nothing. Dog's age. Shadow was 7 years old, which in dog years put him in his late 40s or early 50s. Of course, he wouldn't have the same boundless energy he'd had as a younger dog. That was normal. That was fine. But then came the other signs. Marcus noticed Shadow taking longer to get up from his bed in the morning. There was a slight hesitation, almost like his back legs needed an extra second to remember how to work. And during training sessions, something Shadow had always loved, something that made him come alive. The dog seemed less focused, less eager, more tired. One afternoon, Marcus was running Shadow through his standard detection drills in the training yard. The dog had performed these exercises thousands of times. He could do them in his sleep. But that day, Shadow's pace was sluggish. His nose wasn't working with its usual precision. He seemed distracted, uncomfortable. Marcus stopped the drill early and brought Shadow inside. He ran his hands over the dog's body, checking for injuries, for swelling, for anything that might explain the change. Shadow's muscles felt tight, tense, like he was holding himself in a way that suggested pain. That's when Marcus decided to call the vet. Dr. Patricia Reeves had been Shadow's veterinarian for all 7 years of his service. She was thorough, professional, and she knew Shadow's medical history inside and out. Marcus trusted her completely. So when he brought Shadow in for his examination, explaining the subtle changes he'd noticed, he expected reassurance. Maybe some supplements. Definitely nothing serious. Dr. Reeves examined Shadow carefully. She checked his joints, his spine, his reflexes. She looked in his ears, checked his teeth, palpated his abdomen. She asked Marcus detailed questions about Shadow's diet, his exercise routine, his behavior at home. The examination lasted nearly 30 minutes. When it was over, Dr. Reeves smiled. "He's fine, Marcus," she said, patting Shadow on the head. "Absolutely fine. What you're describing is completely normal for a dog his age. He's not a puppy anymore. He's entering his senior years. You'll notice some natural decline in energy and enthusiasm. It's just part of aging." Marcus felt the tension in his chest ease. Of course, that made sense. He was probably being paranoid, reading too much into normal aging. Shadow was healthy. The vet had confirmed it. Everything was fine. But as Marcus drove home that day with Shadow in the back seat, something nagged at him. A small voice in the back of his mind that wouldn't be quiet. He'd spent 7 years learning to read Shadow's body language, to understand what his partner was trying to communicate. And that voice, that detective's intuition that had solved countless cases, was telling him that something wasn't right. Marcus ignored it. For the next 2 weeks, things seemed normal enough. Shadow still performed his duties. He still went on calls with Marcus. He still completed his training exercises, even if they took a little longer, even if he seemed less enthusiastic about them. Marcus told himself that Dr. Reeves was right. This was just aging. This was natural. This was fine. But the voice in the back of his mind kept whispering, "Something's wrong." Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning, clear and cold. Marcus got the call around 9 a.m. A major drug operation had been busted the night before, and they'd found evidence of a secondary stash house in an abandoned building on the east side of Portland. They needed Shadow to sweep the location, to confirm whether there were any drugs still hidden in the building that the initial search had missed. This was routine work for Shadow. Standard stuff. The kind of call he'd responded to hundreds of times before. Marcus picked up Shadow's vest, clipped it onto the dog's body, and felt that familiar surge of purpose. This was what they were built for. This was what all those years of training had prepared them for. Shadow's tail wagged as they loaded into the patrol car. The dog knew what was coming. He knew it was time to work. And for the first time in weeks, Shadow seemed like his old self. The energy returned to his movements. His focus sharpened. As they pulled up to the crime scene, Shadow's entire body language transformed. He was in work mode. He was a professional. He was exactly where he needed to be. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. See? There was nothing wrong. Shadow was fine. The vet was right. Everything was. But what Marcus didn't know was that Shadow's body was already sending out desperate warning signals. Signals that Marcus couldn't see. Signals that would soon become impossible to ignore. The abandoned building loomed before them like a skeleton. Broken windows, boarded up doors. The kind of place that had been slowly dying for years. Marcus and Shadow had searched dozens of locations just like this one. Condemned buildings, warehouses, forgotten spaces where criminals hid their secrets. Shadow knew the drill. Find the scent, follow it, alert, simple, efficient, effective. Marcus clipped on Shadow's working lead and gave the signal. The dog's nose immediately went to work, processing the complex layers of scent that filled the stale air. Marcus watched his partner move through the building with practiced precision, checking corners, investigating doorways, his body language speaking volumes to anyone trained enough to read it. The morning sun filtered through the broken windows, casting long shadows across the dusty floors. Debris littered the hallways, old furniture, scattered papers, broken glass. The smell of decay and abandonment hung heavy in the air. But Shadow's focus never wavered. This was what he lived for. This was what made him feel alive. The hunt, the search, the purpose. For the first 20 minutes, everything seemed normal. Shadow was working well. His focus was sharp. His movements were purposeful. Marcus felt that quiet satisfaction that always came when he watched his partner do what he was born to do. There was an elegance to it, a kind of ballet performed by a master of his craft. Shadow moved with the confidence of a dog who had done this thousands of times before, who knew exactly what he was looking for, who had never failed to find what he was sent to find. But then something shifted. It was subtle. So subtle that Marcus almost missed it. Shadow's pace slowed. Not dramatically, not in a way that would be obvious to someone who didn't know the dog intimately. But Marcus had spent 7 years learning every nuance of Shadow's body language, and he noticed. He noticed the way the dog's breathing seemed slightly heavier than usual. He noticed the way Shadow's tail, which normally wagged with constant energy, seemed to move with less enthusiasm. He noticed the slight tension in the dog's shoulders, as if Shadow was bracing himself against something Marcus couldn't see. The dog was moving differently, more carefully, like he was conserving energy, like something was taking a toll that shouldn't be taking a toll, like his body was trying to tell him something that his mind, trained and disciplined and utterly committed to the job, was refusing to listen to. Marcus watched closely as Shadow continued his search. The dog investigated a pile of old boxes in what used to be a storage room, his nose working overtime, processing scents that had accumulated over months or years. He found nothing. He moved on, his movements still methodical, still professional, but Marcus could see the effort it was costing him. The dog climbed a set of stairs to the second floor, something he'd done hundreds of times before without hesitation. But this time, Marcus saw him pause at the top, just for a moment, just long enough to catch his breath, just long enough to suggest that the effort had cost him something. The stairs that Shadow normally bounded up 2 at a time seemed to have taken something out of him. Marcus could see the dog's sides heaving slightly, could see the way his muscles seemed to be working harder than they should have to be working. It's nothing, Marcus told himself, even as alarm bells began ringing in the back of his mind. He's just getting older. The vet said so. Shadow completed his sweep of the second floor methodically. He checked every room, every closet, every potential hiding place. No drugs found. The initial search had been thorough, but Shadow had done his job. He'd confirmed it. He'd provided the closure that the investigation needed. He'd done exactly what he was supposed to do, exactly the way he was supposed to do it. But Marcus noticed something else now, something that made his chest tighten with worry. Shadow seemed relieved when the search was finished. Not just satisfied, the way he normally was after completing a successful job, but relieved. Like he was grateful that the ordeal was over. Like his body had been struggling against something, and now that struggle could finally end. They exited the building, and Marcus praised Shadow enthusiastically, rewarding him with his favorite toy, a worn tennis ball that the dog had carried through countless cases, that had been with Shadow through drug busts and missing person searches and criminal apprehensions. Shadow took the ball, but his enthusiasm was muted. He played with it for a few minutes, chasing it half-heartedly across the grass. But his heart wasn't in it. He seemed to be going through the motions, performing the ritual of play because that's what he was supposed to do, not because he actually wanted to. Then he seemed to lose interest entirely. He lay down on the grass outside the building, his tongue hanging out, his breathing slightly labored. His eyes, which normally sparkled with intelligence and energy, seemed dull, tired, worn out. Marcus knelt beside his partner and ran his hands over the dog's body, checking for injuries, for swelling, for anything that might explain the change. "You okay, buddy?" he asked softly. Shadow's tail gave a weak wag, but his eyes seemed tired, worn out, like he'd given everything he had and had nothing left to give, like his reserves had been completely depleted by the simple act of doing his job. Marcus felt the dog's muscles checking for tension or pain. Shadow's breathing was still slightly elevated, and his heart rate seemed faster than it should have been for a dog who was now resting. Marcus's worry deepened. Something was off. Something was definitely off. They drove back to the station in silence. Marcus kept glancing in the rearview mirror at Shadow, who lay on the back seat with his head resting on his paws. The dog stared out the window with an expression that Marcus couldn't quite read. Not pain, exactly, but something. Something that made Marcus's detective instincts scream that something was fundamentally wrong. Something that no vet had been able to diagnose. Something that was progressing silently, invisibly but relentlessly. Back at the station, Marcus noticed other officers looking at Shadow with concern. "Is he okay?" asked Officer James Martinez, one of the younger cops who had always admired Shadow's work. "He seems different." "He's fine," Marcus said. But even as he said it, he didn't believe it. Just tired. That evening, Marcus sat at home with Shadow lying on the rug beside his couch. He ran his hands over the dog's body repeatedly, feeling for lumps, for heat, for anything that might indicate illness. Shadow tolerated the examination patiently, as if he understood that Marcus was trying to help. The dog rested his head on Marcus's leg and closed his eyes, and Marcus could feel the slight tremor in Shadow's body. A tremor that shouldn't have been there. A tremor that suggested something deeper, something more serious, something that was eating away at Shadow from the inside. Marcus decided to schedule another vet appointment. He told himself it was just a precaution, just to be safe, just to get another professional opinion and confirm that everything was fine. But deep down, he knew that something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted. And this time, he wasn't going to accept reassurance without answers. Dr. Reeves had an opening the following day. When they arrived at the clinic, Marcus explained what he'd observed during the crime scene search. The slightly slower pace, the hesitation on the stairs, the unusual fatigue, the way Shadow had seemed relieved when the search was finished, the reduced enthusiasm for play, the tremor in his body. Dr. Reeves listened carefully, nodding as Marcus spoke, her expression thoughtful and professional. She made notes on Shadow's file, occasionally asking clarifying questions, building a detailed picture of the dog's recent behavior. "Let me examine him again," she said. This time, the examination was more thorough. Dr. Reeves spent nearly 45 minutes with Shadow, checking everything from his joints to his organs to his neurological responses. She manipulated his limbs gently, checking for pain or resistance. She palpated his abdomen carefully, feeling for abnormalities. She checked his eyes, his ears, his mouth. She listened to his heart and lungs with her stethoscope, spending an unusually long time on each area. She ran some additional blood work, took his temperature multiple times, and asked Marcus even more detailed questions about the dog's behavior, diet, and daily activities. She wanted to know about Shadow's energy levels at different times of day. She wanted to know if he was eating normally. She wanted to know about his bathroom habits, his sleeping patterns, everything. When she was finished, she sat back and smiled. But Marcus noticed something. A slight hesitation in her expression. A moment where her professional mask slipped just a tiny bit. "Everything looks good, Marcus," she said. "His blood work is normal. His vital signs are normal. His reflexes are normal. I really think you're seeing what you expect to see rather than what's actually there." Shadow is a working dog. These dogs are trained to push through discomfort and fatigue. They're bred for it. It's in their DNA. What you're interpreting as warning signs might just be Shadow being a professional and doing his job despite minor aches and pains that come with age. Marcus wanted to believe her. He really did. But something in his gut, that same instinct that had solved countless cases, that had kept him alive in dangerous situations, that had made him an exceptional detective, was screaming that she was wrong. And he'd learned to trust that instinct. It had never failed him before. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Because I really think something's—" "I'm sure," Dr. Reeves interrupted gently. But Marcus caught the hesitation again. There was something she wasn't saying, something she was holding back. "Trust me, Marcus. If there was something seriously wrong with Shadow, the tests would show it, and they don't. He's healthy. He's aging normally. That's all." Marcus left the clinic with Shadow, and he tried to accept what the vet had told him. She was the professional. She had the medical training. She had the diagnostic tools. If she said Shadow was fine, then Shadow was fine. But that nagging voice in the back of his mind wouldn't shut up. And this time, Marcus was beginning to wonder if that voice was trying to tell him something important. Over the next week, Marcus found himself watching Shadow more closely than ever. He noticed things, small things that individually might not mean much, but together painted a picture of decline. The way the dog sometimes limped slightly on his back left leg, especially in the morning. The way he seemed reluctant to jump into the patrol car sometimes, needing an extra moment to gather himself, sometimes needing Marcus to help him up. The way he would occasionally shift his weight from one side to the other, like he was trying to find a comfortable position and couldn't quite manage it. The way he seemed to move more slowly on stairs. The way his breathing seemed labored after even mild exercise. Marcus mentioned these observations to his partner, Detective Sarah Williams, one afternoon at the station. They were sitting in the break room, drinking coffee, and Marcus found himself describing Shadow's symptoms in detail, almost against his will. "You're overthinking it," Sarah said, not unkindly. She'd worked with Marcus for 5 years and knew him well enough to understand that his obsessive nature, while it made him an excellent detective, could sometimes work against him. Dogs get old. Shadow's been working hard for 7 years. Maybe it's time to think about retirement. Give him a rest. Let him enjoy his golden years. Retirement. The word hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He wasn't ready for that. Shadow wasn't ready for that. They had more work to do, more cases to solve, more criminals to catch. Shadow wasn't supposed to be slowing down. He was supposed to be at his peak. He was supposed to be the best K-9 officer in the entire department. He was supposed to be... But what if Sarah was right? What if Marcus was just being stubborn, unable to accept that his partner was aging? What if Marcus was pushing Shadow too hard, refusing to acknowledge the dog's limitations? What if the kindest thing Marcus could do for his partner was to retire him while he was still relatively healthy, rather than push him until something catastrophic happened? The thought filled Marcus with a complicated mixture of emotions. Relief that there might be a simple solution. Guilt that he'd been pushing Shadow too hard, that he'd been so focused on their work together, that he hadn't properly considered his partner's well-being. Sadness at the thought of not having his partner by his side every single day. Fear that something he couldn't see was progressing silently in Shadow's body. Something that would eventually reveal itself in a way that neither of them could ignore. For the next 2 weeks, Marcus tried to reduce Shadow's workload. He took him on fewer calls. He shortened their training sessions. He gave the dog more rest days. He made sure Shadow had a comfortable bed, plenty of fresh water, high-quality food. He spent more time just sitting with Shadow, petting him, talking to him softly, letting his partner know how much he meant to him. And Shadow seemed to appreciate the change. The dog was more relaxed, more content, more like he was actually enjoying his life rather than just enduring it. His tail wagged more frequently. He seemed more interested in his surroundings. He spent less time limping around and more time resting comfortably. Maybe, Marcus thought, Sarah was right. Maybe Shadow just needed to slow down. Maybe this was the natural progression of things. Maybe everything was going to be fine. Maybe retirement was the answer. Maybe they could transition into a new phase of their lives together, where Shadow could rest and enjoy his golden years, and Marcus could focus on training a new canine partner. But the voice in the back of his mind, that voice that had never steered him wrong, was still whispering warnings. And those warnings were growing louder with each passing day. And those warnings were about to become impossible to ignore. The sun shone brightly on the morning of the annual K9 demonstration at the Portland Police Department, casting a warm glow over the eager crowd that had gathered to see the unit's finest. Families, officers, and community members filled the bleachers, their chatter a low hum of excitement. It was a day of celebration, a day to showcase the incredible bond between canines and their handlers. Marcus had always looked forward to this event, and this year was no different, except for the nagging worry that had been gnawing at him for weeks. Shadow stood proudly beside Marcus, wearing his vest with the department's insignia. The dog's tail wagged as he soaked in the energy of the crowd. But as Marcus glanced down at his partner, he noticed the slight tremor in Shadow's legs. The dog seemed to be leaning against Marcus for support, and that familiar wave of concern washed over him. "Just a little longer, buddy," Marcus whispered, giving Shadow a reassuring pat. "You've got this." The demonstration began with a series of agility exercises, showcasing the canine's ability to navigate obstacles, jump through hoops, and perform precision searches. Each team took their turn, and the crowd erupted in applause as the dogs executed their tasks flawlessly. Shadow was up next, and for a moment, Marcus felt a swell of pride. This was their moment. This was what they trained for. As they approached the agility course, Marcus gave Shadow a gentle nudge. "Let's show them what we can do," he encouraged. Shadow responded with a determined bark, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his partner was holding back. The dog moved through the course, but there was an unusual hesitation in his steps, a slight limp that made Marcus's heart race with worry. "Just get through this," Marcus thought, trying to push aside his anxiety. The crowd cheered as Shadow navigated the jumps and tunnels, but Marcus could sense the fatigue creeping in. Shadow seemed to struggle more than usual, needing extra time to recover between obstacles. When it was time for the final demonstration, a mock search for narcotics, Marcus felt a mix of excitement and dread. The routine was familiar, but today felt different. Shadow was supposed to shine, to show everyone the incredible capabilities of a canine officer. As they moved into the search area, Marcus could feel his heart pounding in his chest. "Find it, Shadow," he commanded, and the dog immediately went to work, sniffing the ground with determination. But as he moved through the area, Shadow's pace slowed noticeably. His movements were labored, and Marcus could see him straining to keep up the search. "Come on, buddy," Marcus urged, hoping to encourage Shadow to push through. But the dog paused, his head down, panting heavily. For a fleeting moment, Marcus thought he saw pain in Shadow's eyes, and the thought sent a jolt of panic through him. The crowd watched in silence, their cheers fading as the tension mounted. Marcus knelt beside Shadow, trying to gauge what was happening. "You're okay, boy. Just a little more," he said. But Shadow didn't respond with his usual enthusiasm. The dog seemed to be struggling to catch his breath. Suddenly, without warning, Shadow collapsed onto the ground, his legs giving way beneath him. The crowd gasped collectively, a wave of shock sweeping through the audience. Marcus's heart dropped as he rushed to his partner, kneeling beside him, panic rising in his throat. "Shadow, no, no, no!" he cried, cradling the dog's head in his lap. Shadow's breathing was rapid and shallow, and his eyes were wide with confusion. "Stay with me, buddy, please." Dr. Patricia Reeves, who had been attending the demonstration, rushed forward, her face pale with concern. She knelt beside Marcus, quickly assessing the situation. "What happened?" she asked, her voice steady but urgent. "I don't know. He just collapsed," Marcus replied, his voice strained with fear. He could feel Shadow's body trembling beneath his hands, and the sight made him feel sick to his stomach. "Shadow, come on, boy. You've got to get up," Marcus pleaded, shaking with desperation. But Shadow lay still, his breathing becoming increasingly erratic. Dr. Reeves began examining the dog immediately, checking his pulse and temperature. "He's in shock," she said, her expression grim. "We need to get him stabilized and to the clinic right away." Marcus nodded, fighting against the fear threatening to consume him. He gently lifted Shadow into his arms, cradling the dog against his chest. The crowd had fallen silent, the gravity of the situation hanging heavily in the air. "Clear a path," Dr. Reeves ordered, and the officers quickly moved aside, creating a route for Marcus to carry Shadow to the squad car parked nearby. As they rushed through the crowd, Marcus could feel the weight of every gaze on him. Whispers filled the air, a mix of concern and disbelief. He couldn't focus on anything but Shadow, who lay limp in his arms, his breathing shallow and labored. "Hang in there, buddy. Just a little longer," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. He could feel tears pricking at the corners of his eyes, but he blinked them back. He needed to be strong for Shadow. He needed to hold on to hope. When they reached the car, Dr. Reeves quickly opened the back door, and Marcus gently placed Shadow inside. "Stay with him, Marcus," she instructed, climbing into the front seat and starting the engine. "I'm going to drive fast, but I need you to keep an eye on him." Marcus climbed into the back seat, positioning himself next to Shadow. He stroked the dog's fur, whispering soothing words, trying to keep him calm. "You're going to be okay. We're going to fix this, I promise," he said, his voice filled with determination. As they sped through the streets, Marcus's mind raced with a mix of fear and confusion. He had spent every moment of the past 7 years beside Shadow, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. He could only wait and pray for good news. Dr. Reeves drove with urgency, navigating through traffic as Marcus focused all his attention on Shadow. The dog's breathing was still shallow, and Marcus could see the distress in his eyes. "Stay with me, boy. Just hang on a little longer," he urged, running his fingers through Shadow's fur, trying to provide comfort. Finally, they arrived at the clinic, and Dr. Reeves jumped out of the car, quickly opening the back door. "I need help," she shouted as she and Marcus carefully lifted Shadow out of the vehicle. The clinic staff rushed forward, ready to assist, and Marcus felt a surge of hope as they carried Shadow inside. The next few hours felt like an eternity. Marcus paced anxiously in the waiting room, his heart racing with worry. He felt lost without Shadow by his side, without the reassuring presence of his partner. He replayed the events of the day in his mind, feeling the weight of every decision he had made. Had he pushed Shadow too hard? Had he ignored the signs for too long? Finally, Dr. Reeves emerged, her expression serious but compassionate. "Marcus," she said, her voice steady, "we've stabilized Shadow, but we need to run some more tests. There are underlying issues we need to investigate." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, his heart sinking. "What's wrong with him?" "There are a few possibilities," Dr. Reeves replied. "It could be related to his heart, or there may be another illness we haven't identified yet. We need to do a full workup. But I want you to know that we're going to do everything we can to help him." Marcus felt his heart drop. "Is he going to be okay?" he asked, his voice trembling. "We're going to do everything we can," Dr. Reeves reassured him. "But I need you to be prepared for the possibility that this may be more serious than we initially thought." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, and Marcus felt a wave of despair wash over him. He had taken so much for granted, the bond he shared with Shadow, the moments they had spent together, the trust they had built. But now, everything felt uncertain. The future was shrouded in darkness, and all he could do was cling to the hope that his partner would pull through. As he left the clinic that night, Marcus glanced back at the building where Shadow was being cared for. "I'll be back to see you in the morning, buddy," he whispered, his heart heavy with worry. "You're going to fight this. You're the strongest dog I know." With those words echoing in his mind, Marcus stepped into the cool night air, determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He would not give up on Shadow. No matter what it took, he would be there for his partner, just as Shadow had always been there for him. The following morning, Marcus returned to the clinic, his heart in his throat. He stepped through the door, the familiar scent of antiseptic filling his nostrils as he approached the front desk. The receptionist greeted him with a sympathetic smile. "Good morning, Detective Chen. Dr. Reeves is in with Shadow now. Would you like to wait in the exam room?" Marcus nodded, his anxiety mounting as he followed the receptionist down the hallway. The bright, sterile lights overhead felt harsh, amplifying his worries. He could feel the weight of the previous day's events pressing down on him. He entered the exam room and took a seat, glancing around at the medical posters on the walls. They depicted various breeds of dogs, outlining their characteristics and common health issues. But none of it mattered right now. All he could think about was Shadow. "Just hang in there," he whispered to himself, trying to steady his racing heart. "You've got to be okay." Minutes felt like hours. But finally, the door opened, and Dr. Reeves walked in, her expression more serious than he had hoped. "Marcus, thank you for waiting," she said, her voice calm but serious. "We've conducted several tests overnight. and I want to go over the results with you." Marcus nodded, bracing himself. "What did you find?" Dr. Reeves took a deep breath, her gaze steady. "Shadow is showing signs of cardiomyopathy, which is a disease of the heart muscle. It can lead to heart failure if not managed properly. The good news is that it's manageable with medication and lifestyle changes. The bad news is that it will require ongoing monitoring and care." The words hung in the air, and Marcus felt a mix of relief and fear. "So, he can still work? He can still be my partner?" he asked, his voice tinged with desperation. Dr. Reeves paused, her expression softening. "That's the tricky part, Marcus. While medication can help manage his condition, the physical demands of being a K-9 officer may be too much for him now. You'll need to consider his health and quality of life moving forward." Marcus's heart sank. He had devoted his career to working alongside Shadow. They had faced danger together, solved cases together, and now he was being told that his partner might not be able to continue working. "But he loves it. He lives for it," Marcus protested, his voice cracking. "We've trained for this. He's the best K-9 out there." "I know," Dr. Reeves said gently, "but it's important to prioritize his health. You'll need to give him time to adjust to the medication and monitor his reactions. We can revisit this after a few months. But for now, I recommend taking him off active duty." A heavy silence filled the room as the weight of her words settled over Marcus. He had never considered this possibility, never imagined that their partnership could be threatened by something as insidious as illness. "What if I just let him ease into it?" Marcus suggested, desperation creeping into his voice. "Maybe he just needs time to adjust. We can slow down the training sessions, take it easy on him." Dr. Reeves shook her head. "I understand where you're coming from, Marcus, but that approach could be dangerous. We don't want to risk further strain on his heart. He needs to rest and recuperate." Defeated, Marcus nodded, feeling the walls close in around him. "I understand," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I can't imagine working without him." "I know this is hard," Dr. Reeves said softly. "But remember, the bond you share with Shadow goes beyond just work. You can still provide him with love and companionship, and he can still enjoy life without the demands of being a K-9 officer." As Dr. Reeves spoke, Marcus's mind raced with memories of all the moments he had shared with Shadow, the late-night training sessions, the adrenaline rush of a successful bust, the quiet evenings spent at home together. Shadow was more than just a partner. He was family. The thought of losing that, of losing their connection, felt like a crushing weight on his chest. "Can I see him?" Marcus asked, his voice steadier than he felt. "Of course," Dr. Reeves replied, leading him down the hallway to the recovery area. As they approached, Marcus could see Shadow lying on a soft bed, his eyes bright and alert despite the circumstances. Relief washed over him at the sight of his partner, but it was mixed with the sharp pang of reality. "Hey, buddy," Marcus said softly, kneeling beside Shadow. The dog lifted his head, his tail wagging weakly as he recognized his handler's voice. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Shadow pressed his nose against Marcus's hand, and in that moment, Marcus felt the deep connection they shared. It was a bond that transcended words, one that had been built over years of trust and loyalty. "We're going to get through this together," Marcus assured him, his voice filled with determination. "I promise." Dr. Reeves watched the interaction, a small smile on her face. "He knows you're there for him, Marcus. That bond is going to be essential as you both navigate this new chapter. Marcus nodded, knowing that their journey would be different moving forward. But he also understood that their partnership would not end here. It would evolve, and together they would find a way to adapt. "Let's take it one day at a time," Marcus said, determination hardening his resolve. "We'll figure this out together." As he sat beside Shadow, feeling the warmth of his partner's body against his, Marcus knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. It wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For Shadow, for their bond, for the love that had carried them through so much already. The morning light filtered through the Venetian blinds of Marcus's apartment, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. He sat at his kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee in front of him, untouched and forgotten. His eyes were fixed on the manila folder that Dr. Reeves had given him yesterday. Shadow's medical records, test results, and a detailed treatment plan. The words seemed to blur together as he read them for the 100th time, trying to make sense of the medical jargon and clinical explanations. Dilated cardiomyopathy, left ventricular dysfunction, reduced ejection fraction, arrhythmia risk. Each term felt like a hammer blow, driving home the reality of Shadow's condition. Marcus had spent his career analyzing evidence, piecing together clues, solving complex puzzles. But this was different. This wasn't a case he could solve through detective work and persistence. This was biology, chemistry, the unpredictable workings of a living, breathing body that was slowly failing. His phone buzzed on the counter, and Marcus glanced at it without moving. A text from Detective Sarah Williams. "How's Shadow doing? Thinking of you both." He didn't respond. He couldn't find the words. How could he explain to his colleagues that the strongest, most capable partner he'd ever known was now fragile? How could he admit that he'd missed the signs, ignored the warnings, pushed his partner too hard? The doorbell rang at 8 a.m. sharp. Marcus had been expecting this visit. He'd called the clinic first thing this morning, asking if he could bring Shadow home. Dr. Reeves had agreed, with strict instructions and a long list of medications and dietary requirements. Now, as Marcus opened the door, he saw the clinic's van parked outside, and one of the veterinary technicians was carefully unloading Shadow from the vehicle. Shadow moved slowly, deliberately, his gait careful and measured. He was on a leash, and the technician held it loosely, allowing the dog to set his own pace. When Shadow saw Marcus, his tail began to wag, but it was a slow, gentle movement. Nothing like the enthusiastic greeting Marcus was accustomed to. "He's doing well," the technician said, handing Marcus the leash. "Dr. Reeves has written out all the instructions. He needs to take his medications twice a day, and you'll want to keep his activity level low for the next few weeks. No running, no jumping, no strenuous exercise. Walks only, and keep them short and easy." Marcus nodded, absorbing the information while keeping his focus on Shadow. The dog padded slowly into the apartment, looking around as if seeing his home for the first time. He seemed smaller somehow, more fragile. Marcus could see the outline of his ribs more prominently than before, and there was a slight tremor in his back legs. "Is there anything else?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "Just follow the medication schedule, monitor his appetite, and watch for any signs of distress, excessive panting, lethargy, loss of appetite. If you notice anything unusual, call the clinic immediately. Dr. Reeves wants to see him back in 2 weeks for a follow-up appointment." After the technician left, Marcus stood alone with Shadow in his apartment. The silence felt heavy, oppressive. He watched as Shadow slowly made his way to his bed in the corner of the living room and carefully lowered himself onto it, letting out a soft sigh as he settled down. Marcus sat on the floor beside the bed, running his hand over Shadow's fur. The dog's eyes were open, watching him with an expression that Marcus couldn't quite read. Was it pain? Confusion? Or was Marcus just projecting his own emotional turmoil onto his partner? "We're going to get through this," Marcus whispered, more to convince himself than anything else. "I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to do everything right this time." The next few days fell into a new routine. Marcus took a leave of absence from the department, unable to focus on work while Shadow was recuperating. He spent his days administering medications, preparing special meals designed for cardiac health, and taking Shadow on short, gentle walks around the neighborhood. The walks were the hardest part. Marcus had always taken pride in Shadow's athleticism, his speed and agility. Now, they shuffled along at a snail's pace, stopping frequently so Shadow could rest. Neighbors who knew them would call out greetings, but there was a sadness in their voices, a recognition of the change that had befallen the once vibrant K-9 officer. On the fourth day, Marcus received a call from Captain Rodriguez, his commanding officer. "Chen, we need to talk about your status," the captain said, his voice formal but not unkind. "How's Shadow doing?" "He's stable," Marcus replied, looking over at his partner, who was resting on his bed. "But he needs time to recover. The vet says he can't return to active duty for at least several months, and even then, it's uncertain." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Marcus could imagine the captain sitting at his desk, processing this information, considering the implications. "I understand. Listen, we're going to need to discuss the future of your partnership. Have you thought about what comes next?" Marcus's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if Shadow can't work, we need to talk about reassigning you to a new K-9 partner. We have several candidates in the training program who could be ready in a few months. In the meantime, you could work on desk duty or help with training." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Reassignment. A new partner. The thought made him feel sick. "I need some time to think about this, Captain," he said, his voice strained. "Of course. Take the time you need. But Marcus, I want you to know that we're here for you. This is a difficult situation, and we understand that. Just let me know when you're ready to talk." After hanging up, Marcus sat in silence for a long time. The reality of his situation was becoming clearer. His career as a K-9 officer was in jeopardy. His partnership with Shadow, the defining relationship of his professional life, was fundamentally changing. And he had no idea how to navigate this new reality. Over the next week, Marcus found himself researching Shadow's condition obsessively. He read medical journals, watched veterinary videos, and joined online forums for owners of dogs with cardiomyopathy. He learned about the different stages of the disease, the various treatment options, and the prognosis for dogs with Shadow's specific condition. The information was both enlightening and terrifying. Some dogs lived for years with proper management. Others deteriorated rapidly. There were stories of miraculous recoveries and heartbreaking losses. Marcus found himself clinging to the success stories, desperate to believe that Shadow could be one of the lucky ones. He also discovered that he had made several mistakes in Shadow's care over the past months. He had pushed the dog too hard, ignored warning signs, and prioritized work over his partner's well-being. The guilt was overwhelming, crushing him with its weight. If only he had paid closer attention. If only he had listened to his instincts earlier. If only he had been a better handler. On day 10 of Shadow's recovery, Marcus received a call from Dr. Reeves. "Marcus, I'd like you to bring Shadow in for his follow-up appointment tomorrow," she said. "We need to assess how he's responding to the medication and discuss some additional treatment options." Marcus agreed, and the next morning, he carefully loaded Shadow into the car for the short drive to the clinic. Shadow seemed to understand where they were going, and his anxiety was evident in his rapid breathing and the way he pressed against Marcus's leg. "It's okay, buddy," Marcus reassured him. "Dr. Reeves is going to help you feel better." At the clinic, Dr. Reeves conducted a thorough examination. She listened to Shadow's heart with her stethoscope, palpated his abdomen, checked his reflexes, and asked Marcus detailed questions about the dog's behavior, appetite, and energy levels over the past week. "He seems to be responding well to the initial medication," Dr. Reeves said finally, her expression thoughtful. "His heart rate is more stable, and he's not showing signs of acute distress. However, I want to adjust his medication slightly and add a supplement that may help support his heart function." "Is he going to get better?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Will he ever be able to work again?" Dr. Reeves set down her clipboard and looked at Marcus directly. "That's a complicated question, Marcus. The truth is, cardiomyopathy is a progressive disease. We can manage it, slow its progression, and help Shadow live a comfortable life. But it's unlikely that he'll ever return to the level of physical activity required for police work." The words confirmed what Marcus had been dreading, but hearing them spoken aloud made them feel final, irreversible. He felt something break inside him, a small piece of his heart shattering with the realization that his partnership with Shadow, as he had known it, was over. "What about quality of life?" Marcus asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Can he still enjoy things? Can he still be happy?" "Absolutely," Dr. Reeves said, her expression softening. "With proper care and management, Shadow can have a good quality of life. He may not be able to work, but he can still enjoy walks, playtime, and most importantly, the companionship and love of his handler. That bond you share with him is powerful medicine, Marcus. Don't underestimate its importance." Marcus nodded, absorbing her words. As they left the clinic, he held Shadow's leash gently, watching his partner move slowly beside him. For the first time since the collapse, Marcus began to accept the new reality. Their partnership would change, but it wasn't ending. It was transforming into something different, something that would require him to be present in a different way. That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open. He typed out an email to Captain Rodriguez. "Captain, I've given this a lot of thought. I understand that Shadow can't return to active duty, and I've come to terms with that. However, I'm requesting that I be allowed to retire Shadow with honors, and that he be permitted to live out his remaining years with me. I want to propose a transition period where I can work with a new K9 partner while continuing to care for Shadow at home. I believe this is the best outcome for everyone involved. The department gets a working K9 officer, and Shadow gets the care and companionship he deserves. I'm ready to discuss this further at your earliest convenience." He read the email several times before hitting send. It felt like a significant moment, a turning point. He was accepting the reality of the situation while also fighting for what he believed was right. A dignified retirement for his partner. Shadow had fallen asleep on his bed, his breathing steady and even. Marcus watched him for a moment, then returned to his laptop. He began researching retirement communities for police dogs, reading about the various programs and facilities available. He wanted to understand all his options, to make sure that whatever decision he made would be the best one for Shadow. As the evening wore on, Marcus made a list of everything Shadow would need moving forward. Medications, dietary supplements, comfortable bedding, gentle exercise routines, regular veterinary checkups. It was a long list, and it represented a significant commitment of time and resources. But Marcus didn't hesitate. Shadow had given him 7 years of loyal service, of unwavering dedication, of partnership. The least Marcus could do was return that loyalty in kind. By the time Marcus went to bed that night, he felt a strange sense of peace. The future was uncertain, and there would be challenges ahead. But he had a plan, a direction, a purpose. And most importantly, he had Shadow, his partner, his friend, his responsibility. As he drifted off to sleep, Marcus's last thought was of the bond he shared with Shadow, a bond that transcended the demands of work and the limitations of illness. That bond was the foundation of everything, and it would carry them both through whatever lay ahead. The weeks that followed Shadow's diagnosis were a whirlwind of adjustments and new routines. Marcus settled into a rhythm that revolved entirely around his partner's needs. Each day began with administering Shadow's medications, which he learned to do with precision and care, measuring out pills and supplements while ensuring that Shadow was comfortable and calm. The dog seemed to sense the shift in their dynamic, and while he had always been eager and energetic, he now approached each day with a quiet dignity that Marcus admired. Marcus had made a point to keep their walks gentle and short, focusing on quality over quantity. They explored the quiet streets of their neighborhood, taking time to smell the flowers and greet familiar faces. The neighbors who had once cheered them on during K9 demonstrations now offered gentle smiles of understanding, acknowledging the changes that had taken place. Marcus appreciated their support, but there was an underlying sadness in each interaction, a reminder of what he had lost. One afternoon, as they walked past the park, Marcus noticed a group of children playing fetch with a golden retriever. The dog bounded happily after the ball, tail wagging enthusiastically. Marcus felt a pang of longing as he watched, remembering the joy Shadow had brought to similar moments. But instead of dwelling on the past, he turned to Shadow, who was sniffing the grass with a look of contentment. "Look at that, buddy," Marcus said, pointing toward the park. "You used to be the star of the show. But you know what? You're still my star." Shadow lifted his head, meeting Marcus's gaze with bright eyes, as if understanding every word. It was moments like these, filled with love and connection, that reminded Marcus of the true essence of their partnership. It wasn't just about the work they did together. It was about the bond they shared, the loyalty and trust that had been built through years of experiences. As the days passed, Shadow grew more accustomed to his new routine. Marcus had researched various activities that would be suitable for a dog with a heart condition, finding ways to keep Shadow mentally stimulated without overexerting him. They began engaging in puzzle games, using treat-dispensing toys that challenged Shadow's mind and encouraged him to think. It was a different kind of training, one that focused on mental agility rather than physical prowess. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Marcus felt a sense of calm wash over him. Shadow lay with his head resting on Marcus's lap, breathing softly as they watched the sun set outside the window. The golden light filled the room, casting a warm glow that mirrored the warmth in Marcus's heart. He had accepted the reality of Shadow's condition, and with that acceptance came a newfound determination to ensure that their time together was meaningful. The following week, Captain Rodriguez reached out to Marcus to discuss his proposal regarding Shadow's retirement. They met at a local cafe, and as Marcus sipped his coffee, he felt a mix of nerves and excitement. He had put a lot of thought into what he wanted to say, and he hoped the captain would understand. "Thanks for meeting with me, Captain," Marcus began, taking a deep breath. "I appreciate you considering my request about Shadow's retirement." Rodriguez nodded, his expression serious. "Of course, Marcus. I want to ensure that you and Shadow have the best possible outcome from this situation." Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped around his cup. "I think it's important to honor Shadow's service. He deserves a dignified retirement after everything he's done for the department. I want to be there for him, to provide the care he needs." Rodriguez listened intently. "I understand that. And I want you to know that the department supports your decision. We can arrange for a formal retirement ceremony for Shadow, and I think it would be a great way to recognize his contributions." Marcus felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. "Thank you, Captain. That means a lot to me, and to Shadow." Rodriguez smiled, then continued, "As for you, I appreciate your willingness to transition to a new K9 partner. We have a young dog in training who I think would be a good fit for you. He's eager and has a lot of potential. We can start the process once you're ready." Marcus nodded, though a part of him hesitated. The thought of working with another dog was both exciting and daunting. "I'll need some time to adjust to the change, but I'm open to it. I want to be the best handler I can be, just like I was with Shadow." Rodriguez raised his cup in a toast. "To new beginnings, then, and to Shadow, who will always be a part of this department." Marcus smiled, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He was ready to embrace the future, even if it meant letting go of the past. In the weeks that followed, they began planning the retirement ceremony for Shadow. The department organized an event at the precinct, inviting officers, community members, and families to come together to honor the K9 service. Marcus was touched by the outpouring of support from his colleagues, who had all witnessed the bond he shared with Shadow. On the day of the ceremony, the atmosphere was filled with a sense of celebration and reflection. Officers adorned the precinct with banners and decorations, and a small stage was set up for the presentation. As Marcus stood beside Shadow, who was adorned with a special vest that displayed the words, "Retired K9," he felt a swell of pride and emotion. The ceremony began with heartfelt speeches from Marcus and Captain Rodriguez, each sharing stories of Shadow's achievements and the impact he had made within the department and the community. Officers recounted tales of their most memorable moments with Shadow, and the crowd laughed and cheered, celebrating the incredible dog who had served them all. As the ceremony came to a close, Marcus stepped forward, holding a plaque engraved with Shadow's name and a dedication to his service. "Shadow has been more than just my partner. He's been my best friend, my confidant, and my family. Today, we honor not just his service, but the bond we share. I promise to care for him in every way possible, just as he has always cared for me." With that, Marcus presented the plaque to Shadow, who nudged it with his nose, as if understanding the significance of the moment. The crowd erupted into applause, and for a moment, time stood still. Marcus felt a sense of closure wash over him. He had honored Shadow's past, and now it was time to embrace their future together. As the guests mingled and shared their stories, Marcus took Shadow aside for a moment of quiet reflection. "We did it, buddy," he said softly, kneeling beside the dog. "You'll always be my partner, no matter what. I'll take care of you, and we'll find new adventures together." Shadow looked up at him, his eyes filled with trust and love. Marcus knew that their bond would remain unbreakable, regardless of the challenges they faced. As the sun set that evening, casting a warm glow over the precinct, Marcus took a deep breath, feeling a sense of hope for the future. He was ready to embrace this new chapter, not just for himself, but for Shadow. Together, they would navigate the unknown, finding joy and fulfillment in every moment they shared. The following weeks were filled with small victories. Shadow adapted well to his new routine, and they found ways to enjoy each other's company without the pressure of work. Marcus introduced new activities, like swimming in the local dog park's shallow area and exploring hiking trails that were easy on Shadow's heart. He reveled in the simple pleasures of watching his partner enjoy life, even if it was in a more relaxed capacity. One afternoon, as they sat in the backyard soaking up the sun, Marcus felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He pulled out his phone and opened the training program for new canines. The department had sent him a list of candidates, and he spent hours researching each dog, looking for a good match. As he scrolled, he came across a picture of a young German shepherd named Max. His ears were perked, and his eyes sparkled with energy. "That looks like a spirited one," Marcus said to Shadow, who tilted his head as if considering the prospect. "What do you think? Should we meet him?" Shadow wagged his tail slightly, and Marcus took that as a sign of encouragement. They scheduled a meet and greet at the precinct for the following week. As the day approached, Marcus felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. He wanted to honor Shadow's legacy while also opening his heart to a new partner. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he also understood that this was a necessary step forward. When the day arrived, Marcus drove to the precinct with Shadow resting comfortably in the back seat. As they pulled into the parking lot, Marcus caught sight of Max, who was being handled by one of the trainers. The dog was full of energy, bounding around as if he were already eager to get to work. After a brief introduction, Marcus was allowed to take Max for a short walk. The young shepherd was enthusiastic, tugging on the leash and sniffing everything in sight. Marcus smiled, feeling the spark of connection. It reminded him of the early days with Shadow, full of promise and potential. "Let's see what you've got, Max," Marcus said, encouraging the dog to explore. They spent the afternoon getting to know each other, playing games, and testing out some basic commands. Max responded well, showing intelligence and eagerness to please. As they returned to the precinct, Marcus felt a growing sense of hope. He knew it would take time to build the same trust and bond that he had with Shadow, but he was excited about the possibilities. "Looks like you've made a new friend," Captain Rodriguez said, watching them with a smile. "I think this could be a great match." Marcus nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest. "I think so too. I just need to take it slow and make sure we're both comfortable." Over the next few weeks, they continued to meet regularly, allowing Max to adjust to Marcus's presence while Shadow provided a steady, calming influence. As the bond between them began to grow, Marcus started to see glimpses of the partnership he had once shared with Shadow. One afternoon, while playing fetch in the precinct yard, Marcus threw the ball, and Max raced after it with unbridled enthusiasm. Shadow watched from a comfortable spot in the shade, his tail wagging slowly as he observed the younger dog. "Look at him go, buddy," Marcus said, laughing as Max returned with the ball, a look of pure joy on his face. "He's got a lot of spirit, just like you did." As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden hue over the yard, Marcus felt a sense of peace settle within him. He knew that while Shadow would always hold a special place in his heart, he was ready to embrace this new chapter with Max. It was a step toward healing, a way to honor Shadow's legacy while continuing the work they both loved. Months passed, and the bond between Marcus and Max deepened. They underwent training together, learning how to communicate and work as a team. Shadow watched from the sidelines, offering quiet support, and Marcus made sure to include him in their daily routines. It was a delicate balance, but one that felt right. One afternoon, as they completed a training exercise, Marcus turned to Shadow, who lay comfortably in the grass nearby. "You've taught me so much, buddy. I hope I can be as good a handler to Max as I was to you." Shadow lifted his head, looking at Marcus with a knowing gaze. The bond between them was unbreakable, rooted in years of shared experiences. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Marcus took a moment to reflect on how far they had come. Shadow had transitioned from being an active K-9 officer to a beloved companion, and now Max was stepping into the role of partner. It was a bittersweet change, but one that filled Marcus with hope and anticipation. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together," Marcus said, looking at both dogs. "We've got each other, and that's what matters." With that, Marcus felt a sense of acceptance wash over him. Change was never easy, but it was a part of life. He had learned to cherish every moment with Shadow, and now he was ready to embrace new beginnings with Max. Together, they were writing a new chapter, one filled with promise, adventure, and the enduring love of a handler and his dogs.